with an amnesiac and a compulsive obstructionist. So, right, you feel like a lot of people when they're taking a deposition, they have to be really hard-nosed to get the answer, and the witness is pretending to forget all sorts of things. Think of the "I don't recall" answer, and the opposing counsel is trying to obstruct. And then the definition for deposition defending is 7 hours locked in a room with a compulsive talker and a sociopath. So when you're the person defending the deposition, you're trying to keep your client from giving away the store for no good reason, going along with all the tactics that the other side's doing. It's very hard on both sides, any way you slice it. And I'm going to play a quick little bit from the Justin Bieber deposition. I just want to give you an example of how bad things can get in a deposition in terms of obstruction, if it comes up. Yes, okay. So it's going to be, I'm going to get it as loud as it can. And if you can't hear it, just tell me and I'll just give it up and consider this a failed attempt. All right.
Remember earlier today when I asked you, why don't you listen to what I have to say first? And then maybe you'll tell me yes.
I don't have to listen to anything you have to say.
My question. Today, do you have a question about my question?
Today,
you have the right to be clear for you to be able to be clear. Being in Australia ever?
I don't know if I've been to Australia. You been to Australia?
Are you aware that Scooter Braun knows that your bodyguards have attacked photographers?
What projection? To form. What kind of question is that? That doesn't make sense. That's correct. That doesn't make sense. That's a weird.
So, if you heard any of that, if you don't, I apologize, but if you heard any of that, you can see that it just gets ugly, and it's very hard to know what to do. But the difference is that when you're the person defending the deposition, you can prepare your witness for it. So you can do mock depositions with him and deposition training, and show him or her what it's going to be like. You'll also have an opportunity, although a lot of people don't use this, and I don't understand why. I didn't know about it, really using it until relatively recently when I started with the firm I'm at. What's called redirect, where you can go back and ask kind of cleanup questions of your own client that have to be asked in a non-leading form, but they can solve a lot of problems when the other side tries to put you in a corner that isn't appropriate or right. You can clean it up at the end. And as the person taking the deposition, you have an opportunity to prepare and put documents in front of the person and everything like that. So here, though, right, we have this kid who doesn't know the first thing about the case. That's Debbie, who's in essentially a locked room at her own school and being questioned by the police. And so, that's the setup. That's what's going on here. And it's really amazing when you think of it that she said as much as she did, given those circumstances. So there was no investigation into the 7-hour conversation. So let's just walk through what we'd asked. When we ask, okay, let's do the when, where, how, what, why. When did this happen? Who made the call? Why? And then for each thing you would have the when, where, how, why question in docs. Where you would ask about documents that might be, emails, or did you take notes? And you would go through each step. So the conversation, when it happened, whether there were others, how it went, what Don said and when he said it, how that affected what you thought. And you go right down the line from there. To think for a minute about, and I don't know about Don, I just talk about him because he's the big flag that we see, and he gives me the ickiest feeling in my stomach. Now that doesn't mean he's done anything, but I really think he gave other people an icky feeling too, that independent consultant, and that's a whole nother thing. I don't think we still know the full story of that independent consultant who did the weird memo about Anon giving Hay a scarf, and that was why she said, basically, he doesn't seem that into her. What is going on here? And we know that the whole idea, it seems like the whole idea about her going to California came from him. So the next thing I want to talk about, so what I'm saying is, so we see these circumstances where the police, by the way they were doing everything, were excluding all sorts of evidence, knowledge, whatever, that would have come forward if it had been an open-ended process. So they were on campus associating themselves with the school for about a month, telling anyone and everyone that they had everything on the guy. And the problem is that most people's reaction to someone who's very confident and tells you that they're right and insists that they're right is to think, well, I guess they're right, especially if they're young and impressionable. And our reaction probably should be, they're probably wrong. And I have what's called, and I don't mean to criticize him, I'm sure he's a wonderful person and maybe a good actor, I call it the Stephen Baldwin rule. And because there's a really good commentary in the movie The Usual Suspects, and there's a lot of people in there. Kevin Spacey's in there. A lot of other people have gone on to do other things. And except for Stephen Baldwin, he hasn't done much acting that I know of since then. And he was the only one that in the documentary seemed almost belligerent about what a principled actor he was. So there's this scene in there where he's being really Baldwin-esque intense, saying, and I told that director when he offered the part, I'm a serious actor, this has got to be serious, we don't screw around, and the guy went on for a few minutes like that, and my reaction to that was, well, we know who isn't a serious actor. The person that's telling you how serious of an actor they are. Kevin Spacey, if you interview him, is not going to tell you, I'm the most serious actor in the world. He's just going to show it. And so that's the thing that you see with the police. They're there at the school telling everybody that they've got everything on the guy, but they're not going to tell you what they have. And it looks like for a second, I'm breaking out in Hangouts, not moving. Anyway, and so you just have to think, okay, so there's all this information that we have no idea about because the very act of the investigators inserting themselves into the school, being there for a month, and telling people they have the right guy, change people's memories, change people's ability to share what was going on. And then you have that they were doing these interviews there under the settings and the way they did the interviews, just the fact of doing them, especially a month later, right? Because I think Bob's right to point out that they waited a month. And that obviously affected things. I shouldn't say obviously, that affected things. Because that's another thing I say. If someone adds an ly word, like obviously or clearly, it's probably not obvious and not clear. If it really was, they wouldn't have to say that, so try not to. And then the way they conducted these interrogations got rid of a lot of evidence. And in some cases, they'd come back twice and keep whittling it down. And the problem there is that when we get to trial, there's not as much for the defense to work with because they already have these witnesses that have been so influenced by the process that they're not really good for much. And here's the final thing that's really sad is that then you have a trial record like we have here that's wrong, and it's led people to remember things wrong, to remember things that didn't happen and not remember things that did. And that's why when we come to the Serial podcast originally, we have this guy, Adnan, that doesn't remember anything. He doesn't remember anything because of the process and the investigation, but because by being part of the trial and being fed all this wrong information, he's remembering things that didn't happen and not remembering things that did. And that's the thing that frustrates. Frustrated me